Now to part two. So the question is that part two stand for Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Part two of the Customs and Excise Tobacco Products Budget Measures Amendment Bill relates to excluding price increases from required CPI indexation of or related to social assistance. What I understand, I wasn't on the select committee that considered this bill, being a member of the Health Committee, not the Finance and Expenditure Committee, and it is a pity, I have to say it's a pity that the chair of the Health Committee used his call to take a closure motion rather than to offer a substantive contribution to the debate on part one. Maybe he will offer more substance on part two. But what I understand the point of part two to be is to ensure that the excise tax increases result in a significant real-term increase in the cost of tobacco for the people who receive income in any of the ways captured by part two of this bill. Now, the income that we're talking about here are people who receive income which is related to the Child, Young Persons and Their Families Act, the Education Act, that being student allowances, people who receive money through Working for Families, people who receive money through New Zealand superannuation and retirement income, people who receive social security money, and people who receive money through the War Pensions Act. What this aims to do is to ensure that the increase in the cost of tobacco isn't factored into any increases in those benefits or allowances, and thus offset the increase of the tobacco, so that in real terms that the price of tobacco goes up, which is a perfectly fine concept, except for the fact that, as Treasury points out, one of the unfortunate aspects of a tobacco tax increase is that it is regressive. It affects the people on the lowest incomes the most, and indeed it will certainly affect the people who receive their income through any of these measures. However, it will also affect people who receive their income through wages but are also on a low income. However, people who receive their income through wages will be able to argue that the increase in tobacco excise results in an increase in the consumer price index, and they will be able to bargain for a wage rise as a result. It will certainly be factored into wage bargaining around the country. So what you get, in effect, is a two-tier system. Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Clark. You knew what I was going to say. It's a two-tier system whereby people who receive an allowance or a benefit or a pension, which is, I suppose, funded through taxes, are going to have their ability to offset this increase in the cost of living reduced, or in fact negated, whereas those people who earn wages are not. And I guess it's similar, it's analogous in a way to the way the government is behaving around other people who receive a benefit. So, for instance, the government has said that women who receive a benefit will be able to get free contraception. In fact, in an interesting act of eugenics, that their daughters will also be able to get free contraception. But not all women on a low income, or indeed all women, singling out people who receive a benefit. Likewise, parents who receive a benefit will now be required to send their children to early childhood education. Not everybody, not making early childhood education compulsory for everybody, but singling out people who receive a benefit for special treatment. And this is another instance of the government doing that, singling out people who receive a benefit, stigmatising the fact that they receive a benefit by treating them differently from everybody else. So it's unfortunate that this bill continues that theme that we have seen from this government. One thing that I find particularly interesting, Mr. Chair, is the fact that this bill will pick on our veterans who receive a pension by way of the War Pensions Act. Now, interestingly, the Minister for Veterans Affairs is in the chair at the moment, and he might have some thoughts on this, because this amendment to the War Pensions Act precedes much more significant amendment to the War Pensions Act that veterans have been calling for some years now. In fact, the government has had a report in its hands for more than 2 years indicating how it could carry out the amendments to the War Pensions Act that are required in order to make it more equitable, fairer on those veterans who served before 1974 when ACC was introduced. Those are the types of amendments that veterans want to see made to the War Pensions Act, not this amendment which will curtail any increase that they might get to their pension to offset the increase in tobacco taxation, the increase in cost for their cigarettes. So, Mr. Chair, I understand what this part is about, what it is trying to achieve. It is trying to ensure that these tax increases result in a real price increase. I appreciate that. But once again, rather than ensuring that is the case for everybody, this government is ensuring that it particularly picks on the people who receive a benefit. And not just the people who receive an unemployment benefit or a sickness benefit or an invalid's benefit, but even the people who receive New Zealand superannuation, even the veterans who have served our nation overseas, put themselves in harm's way, have received injuries or illnesses as a result of serving our nation over many decades and many conflicts around the world. This government is going to pick on them by telling them they're going to make sure that their pension can't be increased as a result of the CPI indexing that would be linked to this bill. It comes as no surprise that once again this government picks on anybody who receives their income in that way, stigmatising them, singling them out in the way that this government knows how. Mr. Chair, although we understand the point behind this part, we have to point out the inadequacy of the way the government has done it and the fact that once again people who receive benefit or government assistance are being singled out by this national-led government.
Mr. Chair.
David Clark.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I want to start, Mr. Chair, by labelling this part of the bill